Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. If you're looking for a guide to navigating life after stroke, check out my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It's filled with practical strategies, inspiring stories, and insights that can help you on your recovery journey. You can find it on Amazon or at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. Today, we're diving into an incredible and deeply inspiring story with Helen van Hooft, a migrainous stroke survivor and spiritualist. Helen's journey through a rare and challenging condition has shaped her perspective on life, resilience, and the importance of living authentically. Helen's experience as a spiritualist adds a unique layer to her story, offering insights into how connection, introspection, and self-discovery have played a role in her recovery. Whether you're a stroke survivor, caregiver, or someone seeking inspiration, this episode is sure to resonate deeply. So let's jump in and hear from Helen van Hooft. Helen van Hooft, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you too. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
Well, it was a bit of a lead up on the 29th of April. Started to have a massive migraine. I was working and in the middle, coming to the end of what I was doing, and I had a massive pain go up the back of my head. And I sort of came downstairs because it was pandemic, and I came downstairs. My husband took a look at me, and something wasn't right. It was, I say in inverted commas, usual for me to have a migraine at a certain time of the month. And I'd had that, but it didn't really go away. And I tried to power through, I guess. And I said to him, it's sort of ramped up. So it was my, again, usual pattern of behavior to have a shower and take myself to bed. And then he wouldn't normally see me for, I would say, about 12 hours. I'd sleep it off. This time, within, I'd say, I don't know, an hour or so, I came back down. I was agitated. I was pacing. I was in a lot of pain. And he looked at me and said, something's not right. I said, no, I know something's not right. Pain. And I was sort of clenching my hands. I was pacing my feet. My toes were curling. And he just took a look at me. I just couldn't settle. So he phoned sort of the Dutch equivalent of like their help line, sort of medical help line. And they were talking, can't really remember too much. Described my symptoms and asked what the pain was. Now, I've had 4 children, so I can tolerate pain. And it was ramping up and it was going quickly. And I said, it's about 8. She was like, that's not good. And I'm like, tell me about it. So she was like, has she vomited? And he was like, no. And right on cue, I was sick. So she was like, get her to the hospital now. I don't like her symptoms. Just by sheer thought, I said, I think we'd better take a bucket with us. And lucky enough that getting me in the car, he had to help me into the car, get me into the car. Just the movement of that car as we had to go up a slipway onto the main road. well, you can imagine what happened in that car. And we were very thankful that I had bought the bucket. And we arrived, he just sort of, my husband, my children have always teased him that he's a bit of a granddad driver. And that day, I think he wasn't. And we arrived, and I was very dramatic as I arrived in the accident and emergency department because I collapsed as soon as I arrived in the accident and emergency. I can't remember too much, but they sort of obviously bundled me up because, as I said, it was pandemic. They sort of bundled me up, and what I can recollect was a nurse was trying to put a mask on me, and I got very agitated because I have a very sensitive sense of smell, and I can clearly recall the smell of vomit. And so I was ripping this mask off, and I can remember, I don't know whether it was a doctor or a nurse, just saying in Dutch, just leave it, because that was getting on my nerves. By the time I came back round, I'd had all manner of examinations, including CT scans. I think, I don't know if it was MRI. Anyway, I can't remember. But there was no tumours or bleeds or anything into my brain. So I had completely gone, and I'd had a near-death experience, and all sorts of stuff had happened. But it was still not clear what was happening, other than when I'd come back round, it was saying, can you describe the level of your pain? And I said, well, put it this way, if I had a knife, I would be driving it into my head right now. And she'd be like, okay. And the panic in the room. So it was still not clear at this point what was going on. No stroke had been diagnosed or whatever. And they kept me in overnight. And by the afternoon, the next day, everything was quiet. There was nothing going on. I was completely calm, clear. And they said, we can't do anything. Nothing is showing, nothing. It was like nothing at all it happened. So the only thing that they could do was send me home. It was completely bizarre. So off I go, home we go. I was scared. My husband was scared because it was so frightening. And they sent me home with painkillers, instructions, obviously clear instructions. If this happens again, this is what you do. You don't mess around, because this is completely unknown. They'd kept me on oxygen to preserve my brain. They were very, very cautious. The level of care was unbelievable. And they were just completely flummoxed. And within 20 minutes of being home, happened again. Didn't know. And my husband straight on the phone. And obviously he was scared. And all they could do was say, give her the tablets, knock her out, and see what happens. So that's what we did. And I'm out for the count.
And that's just to get the pain managed and to get you through that part.
Yeah, because there's nothing, they don't, at this point, they don't understand what is happening. They're questioning whether it's these hideous, if anybody listening has them, what they call cluster migraines, where they come.
Let's take a quick break here before we continue with Helen's powerful journey and her reflections on resilience and spiritual growth. I want to remind you about resources that can help you in your own recovery journey. Firstly, my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened, is packed with insights, practical strategies, and inspiring stories on post-stroke growth. It's available on Amazon and at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. Second, if you're looking for a more guided support, check out the courses available at recoveryafterstroke.com/learn. These narrated video lessons are created by a stroke survivor for stroke survivors, designed to help you take actionable steps in your recovery. Now let's get back to the interview.
And they come with such a ferocity that it is this, you just feel like your head is going to explode. And I'm not a dramatic woman. Yes, I have some dramatic flair, of course, but I'm not somebody that's going to scream and be hysterical or anything like this. But this pain in my head, my goodness me, it was just, I could have literally, like I say, stabbed my head. I could have just thrown myself off a cliff. It was just unbelievably unbearable. I couldn't, and they could see how my hands, my feet, my legs, I was just agitated all the time. I just couldn't do anything. And I would hold on to my husband and I would just squeeze. So they were, and what they do with cluster migraines is they put you on oxygen. And what they have learned in the medical profession, that to give you oxygen once you're having a cluster migraine, is that the cluster migraine responds to oxygen after about 20 minutes. It wasn't responding. So what they could then what they could realize, that it wasn't cluster migraines, but to keep me on oxygen was to preserve my brain, because they had no real knowledge of what was happening. So this pattern started to repeat for 10 days. And what then, because of, I guess, the pain and whatever, I started to collapse. So paramedics then would be called to my house, because I would collapse, and obviously that's not good. The paramedics came, gave me fentanyl to relieve me of pain. They were, we don't know. And because then I would respond, the pain would go, and I would come out and be sort of compos mentis, and they were like, well, we don't know. This is, and it's this pattern. And in the end, I just could feel within my body, and my husband was like, this is not good. And I could have this sense within me. I just felt like I was on this steam train heading towards something not good. And I just felt like nobody was, they were listening, but not. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
some
They
that,
were they were hearing you, but they weren't getting the message. They
yeah,
were,
hearing me, but not really listening. It's like,
yeah.
something's going to happen, because this isn't right. It's not responding, and it's not going away. And I
And
can't live my life in bed, you know.
and in the end, it was diagnosed. This is, hopefully you can help here. This is the weird part. It's diagnosed as a migrainous stroke, which when I look at it on Google, it says migraine associated stroke, also known as a migrainous infarction or migraine induced stroke, it is an uncommon complication of migraine identified by ischemic stroke on neuroimaging that corresponds to prolonged aura symptoms in a patient with migraine. So in the end, they they have identified it. They have given you that particular diagnosis. How long did it take for them to get there?
Well, as I said, this pattern continued for 10 days and it was horrendous. I remember one day my elder son came home to just to see me and gave me a hug. And in that hug, it instantly happened. Like it would come on like a sledgehammer hitting my head. And, it's just so traumatic. Anyway, we booked an appointment at the doctor again. And it was a young doctor. She was, yeah. And she sat and she listened to the story. And she said, I can see, you're upset, you're traumatized. And I said, yes, because this shouldn't be happening. There's something not right. And she said, okay, I'm going to send you for an MRI. I'm going to see and I'm going to do that today. And she phoned a colleague of hers at the hospital, and she said, and you're going to leave here and you're going to go. And she did. So off we trek back to the hospital, and I walk in fine, but obviously husband and I are quite anxious because we know that this thing can happen at any time. And so they wheel me down for an MRI. I go in fine, and as they wheel me out, I'm sat with my head in my hands and I'm rocking. So the noise of the MRI has triggered one of these episodes. So it's all hands on deck with the accident and emergency team. And they're like, what on earth we do with the oxygen? And so they can see it in full effect. They can see how immediate it happens and da 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 da. And they're like, okay, what do we do? They're sort of giving me sort of pain and this, that, and the other. So they admit me to the ward, and I think that's on the Friday. So I'm on the ward, and then on the Saturday, because it's almost like each time, what I forgot to tell you, Bill, each time they are calling like stroke, because there's like stroke like symptoms, how I'm doing it because of they're going through that stroke check, with the
Fast.
and the fingers, how many fingers, and I can remember I'm getting a bit agitated with it because it's constant what they're doing, and I realize it's precaution and it's care, and I'm every time they're like because there's symptoms that I'm showing that they're not too happy with, and then it goes and then it's back again and then it goes, and so and then on the Saturday there's two nurses that come in the room, and it's a young chap that's in his nurse's training, and it's I don't know what time it is, and I'm going through the process again, and I know that they've woken me up, so I've obviously slept a long time, and and he's at the end of my bed, and like, clearly something's not quite right. And they're doing the stroke check, and they're like, "Am I?" And he's asking me a question, and I can remember they said, "How many fingers am I holding up?" I'm like, "What fingers?" He's like, "What?" I'm like, "What fingers?" He said, "Helen, are you telling me you can't see my fingers?" I'm like, "I can't even see you. I can hear you." He's like, and they called it, and I'd had a stroke.
Wow.
And I had had a right occipital infarct. So all of the right occipital is completely gone.
And the MRI confirmed it.
So that was on the Saturday. On the Tuesday, because it was a national holiday, on the Monday, so all the consultant and everything was away. On the Tuesday, they wheeled me down and took me in for the MRI. And they could see.
All right. So, an ischemic stroke,
Yeah.
apparently, according to me and my knowledge, perhaps I'm wrong now, is where there's a clot of some sort, some kind of a blockage in the blood vessel.
No clot, but it was a block.
Blocked from something, or has it retracted and
Partially.
instead of being round, it's flat or something?
Don't know. I can't answer that question
Okay.
because I think um, my neurologist, when she told me on the, because I'm still under the care of my neurologist because I have a chronic condition called status migrainosis. So that's a permanent untreatable migraine. Um, as a consequence of all of that, um, she's she just, it's all to do with all of the pressure that was there that caused um, the blood to go into the right occipital of my brain.
Okay. So it sounds like some kind of a, just like a lack of blood flow more than anything caused, and by the immense sort of pressure caused by this migraine has
Long.
impacted negatively the ability for blood to flow to the right occipital lobe, and that caused a headache. Did it cause other symptoms to your body, like any type of deficits that you
Stroke.
felt physically?
The stroke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a left-sided weakness. Um, I have in my left eye. So my eye itself is healthy. So
Mm.
I've had lots of tests and investigations with the like the Dutch equivalent of the Royal Society for the Blind. Um, so my eyes, in particular, my left eye, is completely healthy. So it's the brain. Obviously, we know once blood gets to the brain, that's it. It's dead.
Yeah.
Um,
The eye is healthy. A lot of stroke survivors actually might not be aware that when they have deficits in the eye, it's not the eye, it's the
it's the brain.
neuronal connections to the eye are
Yeah,
not there because there's damage there. And
yeah,
therefore, um, it's a cause of, well, say somebody has blindness because of a stroke. It's it's a different kind of blindness because it's not the eye that's the
the
problem. It's
computer. The
there.
brain is the
Yeah.
computer.
Yeah.
So it's that bit. So all of that occipital bit is completely gone in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my eyes rely completely on the left side to work. So I have a visual impairment. So on my left, I can't see. So to the left, it's like there's a line in my vision. So when I'm home, obviously I'm in a familiar surrounding. So my memory fills in that blank. So I can effectively see, I know what I'm doing.
Mm.
But should things change, then I'm a bit scuppered. And there's an example of that, like last night, there was a pair of shoes because they were left on the mat where they shouldn't be.
Mm.
And because they were unfamiliar, I didn't see them. So I tripped over them because they shouldn't be there. I didn't see them. So I tripped over them. So
Yeah.
when I'm out and about, I'm more vulnerable because I'm in an unfamiliar place. So I'm having to see and move.
Much more
Now,
overhead than not normally.
yeah. So in my home, I'm okay. Now, the stroke has left me very light sensitive, very movement sensitive, and very noise sensitive because it's a migrainous stroke. So anybody that has migraines know how sensitive we become. Um, so I have to live with that all of the time. Like you say, like a left-sided weakness as well. I used to be very, not very, but I could get very aphasic when I'm tired and lose my words. Fatigue, that's I think a general thing when you're stroke.
Mm.
Um, and with that fatigue, you can sort of get emotional and irritable and things like that. That's less so, which I'm fortunate about, but I can get tired still.
Mm. The Again, according to the internet, the occipital lobe sits at the back of the head and are
Yeah.
responsible for visual perception, including
Mhm.
color, form, and motion. Have you had any visual perception issues, color issues, form and motion issues?
Motion, if especially motion. I'm so grateful about not losing my color perception because color is a big thing for me. Um, I've told you about vision, but motion, I'm really, really motion sensitive. So if there's a lot of movement around me, my only way of coping with that is closing my eyes. Um, so there's a loss of independence because driving was a big thing for me. And obviously, I can't do that anymore because over here in the Netherlands, also, we have cyclists. That's a big part of their
Mm.
culture.
Mm.
And along the side of the roads, there's lots of waterways, and um, to help manage the water in this country, there's also a lot of trees. So the trickery of the light, the sun coming through the trees, and in the summer with all the leaves and things and the wind, when that blows and plays with the light on the cars, It's things like that that I've learned how the light refracts. My brain can't cope with that. So I have to close my eyes. Now, if you're driving a car,
It's not a good idea to close your eyes.
there's no. And also with when it's raining and you've got the windscreen wipers
Mm,
going, so you've got the rain coming, windscreen wipers, and the lights of the oncoming cars.
mm,
My brain can't cope with that either.
mm,
And the only way I can cope with that is to close your eyes.
mm.
So I'm a bit lethal if you put me behind a wheel of a car. So it's all, although one of my goals, because I like to set goals for me to achieve, um, was to get myself back driving again. And I started, yeah, I did it. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, hang on. Oh, it was only in doing it did I realize, hang on a minute, I can't, no, this isn't good. This isn't good. So I had to sit down and reflect, actually, no, this isn't for me, because if I hurt somebody because I want to be driving, no, I can't live with that. That's not,
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
How were you employed beforehand? What kind of work did you do?
I'm self-employed.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm I'm self-employed, so I'm a medium and a coach and a tutor of that. So that
And were you a self-employed medium and coach, etc., who had a practice somewhere that you went to do that work?
well, this was in the pandemic,
Ah,
and because I'm expat as well, so I was working primarily online, um, and building myself back up again. So yeah, I'm having to do that all over again.
I know how you feel. I've been there, done that, and still doing that. Had the 7 years or so to get back to work, and then that was 2019, and I don't think I was at work for more than about 6 to 9 months. Self-employed as well, and then we were in the biggest lockdown on the planet in Melbourne here in Australia for nearly 18 months out of 24. And then the economy goes into nosedive for many, many reasons. Um, and in Victoria, where I live, more so because the economic situation to keep people locked up for such a long time had a greater impact than some other states. And we still haven't got out of that mess, and people are struggling, to employ people to provide them services because the funding is not so good. So it's been a real battle from about 20,000 to 20,000 from 2012 to 2024 to stay afloat, to cover outgoings, to achieve financial independence, to have people employed. It's been a massive thing. And it kind of is a little, it's been okay because there's no overheads. I don't have an office. I don't have a factory and a whole bunch of things and massive loans that are out on the business or anything like that. So you kind of scale down and then you scale up. But at the same time, when you're scaling down, you're not earning money. So it's really tough, right? But it feels like there's no other choice. Like, what do? You have to keep finding a way forward. I'm lucky my wife works, so she's been able to cover the outgoings. But I'll tell you what, it does take I'm not sure if it's not emotional, it's a psychological hit on you because and I'm not doing this much, right? But, I have been at my worst times kind of feeling like, oh my God, like men are traditionally the breadwinner and you're not bringing any money and you're relying on your wife. And, there's a little bit of that negative self talk, very short amount of time, but still really surprised that it's there. And it's like, wow, you've never dealt with anything like this before, have you, mate? So you've got to work a way through and deal with it. And your wife's not saying any of that stuff. She's not saying, why don't you pull your finger out and give us some more income? She doesn't do that. But I still have that thing that goes on in my head that many males might um, relate to. And I suppose other people who are not males, women, might relate to it as well. So that's been one of the biggest battles. And I see it as a setback when I've spoken to people about it, family and friends who thank God are healthy and well and they've been going well and they're achieving their financial goals, amongst other things. It has come up a couple of times where I've sort of said, like, this has been such a massive financial setback. It's crazy.
It's
Um,
hard.
how do you deal with that? How do you kind of wrap your head around that part of it?
Oh, it is it is hard because you have you have your own voice in your head, but you also have the medical profession with what they know medically saying, you can't do that. You shouldn't be doing that because I am also studying within what I do. And I remember, as I affectionately called her, my brain nurse. And I told her what I wanted to achieve within my like mediumship, if you like, and the study there. That, and she was like, "Oh, that's a lot." And then when within that, people, because you've had a brain injury, they don't understand it, and because they've got no perception of it, and they're like, "Oh, are you sure? Oh, are you? I don't." And one person in particular, you can't do that. She's not this. She's not, and and you and I think, and the effects, like on my husband, who had a burnout, as it's called over here, not just because of me, it was a whole catalyst of stuff, um, that sort of, I think I was the cherry on the cake.
Mm.
Um, I think you have to take it one day at a time. And the thing that I've learned is thoughts are not things.
Mm.
And if you start going down that rabbit hole of your thoughts, that I've learned to think, get off, that you can change your thoughts. You don't have to keep thinking that thought. And I did it the other day, and a friend of mine, because I started on that track, and a friend of mine sent me a voice clip, and she said, "I think we need to change our thoughts about that." And I thought, "Oh, you're so right." I did it to myself. I did it. She was so right. And her manner in which she said it was like almost quite school teacherish. "I think we need to change our thoughts about that." I thought, yeah, you're so right. We do. And I think, Bill, it is our thoughts and our own self perception. And we get so coloured, if you want, when we were talking about colour, about what we should be doing. We should have achieved that. We must do that. I'm a man, so I must have achieved this and I should be earning that and da da da. Yeah, but you're a man that has had a stroke.
Most
You
importantly.
know, you know, and so your life has been shaped and and affected and all of it. So you're doing the best that you can given the circumstances. And, all credit to you by getting up again and living each day the best way that you can. And your best, my best, our best is going to be different every single day. And that's all we can do is live our best every day.
Yeah. You know, that guy that says that stuff to me and puts those thoughts in my head, he doesn't even consider the fact that I've had a stroke. That's how bizarre it is. It's like, are you like the same person? Are we different people? Who is it that is saying those things? It's so weird that person doesn't even consider the person who had a stroke at all. Like, I that version of me treats myself worse than the people
Yeah.
who don't know I've had a stroke, and you don't look like you've had a stroke, therefore you need to respond appropriately. That's the same treatment that I do to myself when I'm in that
I
headspace. It's
know.
so weird. And it's like, how do you A, do that to yourself, and then also be the same, be living in the same body and still have the ability to take that tone? Like, it's terrible, but it's so weird. I try to observe myself going down that path so that I can stop that voice, but it's such a strong voice.
It is. It is. And I think, you know, people, you don't look like you've had a stroke. Okay, tell me what a person that's had a stroke should look like.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember I told somebody to get out of my house. I think it was probably coming up 2 years ago, because they were supposed to come to our house um, to assess. They came to assess me in order to give us some help and support, because I needed it. I needed. My husband works full time. We have 3 children. Well, adult child and 2 children um, living here. My adult child is now moved out subsequently, but at the time, working full time. Um, and I would have appreciated some help with the chores and whatnot, and not driving and, yeah. And so we wanted to investigate if that was possible. And so in this person comes, and I could just tell, because of obviously how I'm made, the sensitivity and this, that, and the other, I can get, a bit of a sense of people. And she looked at me, because I'm walking, I can use all of my limbs because I worked hard on my physio, and I have that sort of strength. I'm grateful to that. And she sort of looked at me, and obviously my face isn't drooped or anything like that, and I can talk and blah blah blah. And she was asking me these questions, and she was so judgmental. She said, "Well, you don't look like you've had a stroke." I said, "Well, what should I look like? You look too well." I said, "I have had a stroke, but you're young." Yes, I was 48 when I had a stroke. Oh, I've never heard of this drug. Yes, I've told you it's very bad. Blah, blah. And in the end, I said, well, you can leave. What? I said, you have come here. You are so judgmental. I said, you can leave. Well, you're too well. You don't need any help. I said, I do. I've asked for help. I can't do this. I can't manage my home. My husband works. You don't look like somebody that needs help. Get out.
Mm.
I said, you have no medical training. You, you, you are not, you don't know my medical history. You've looked at me. You've judged me. I don't need to explain myself to you.
Yeah. Part of it can be excused when that person comes in like that. I mean, it's complete ignorance. And usually it's from lack of experience, that ignorance. And then there's other factors, lack of training and all that kind of stuff. And then there's like perhaps her job. Was it an assessment to not supply the help? Or was it an assessment to supply the help? Like,
To
why were they
shift
assessing you?
to
Yeah.
we had asked to see if I could perhaps have like a taxi, because obviously I can't
Mm,
drive, to help me get to a supermarket um, in the local area, and for a cleaner to come in to help me
mm,
um, clean my house, some domestic help, um, just to maintain some standard within my home.
mm,
Um, and because she looked at me, and because I can use my arm and my leg, and she said, yeah, that I was not somebody that presents classically as a stroke.
yeah. It's a big
And
problem.
and because she had never heard of the stroke, my brain nurse was sat with me.
Mm, yeah.
And I was like, but if I hadn't have had a stroke, would she be sat with me?
Mm, mm, mm.
And basically, she didn't like certain aspects of it, and the fact that I was able to sort of advocate for myself.
Mm. Your career would have people not getting you, misunderstanding you anyway, normally, wouldn't they? Like the general run of the mill person who doesn't hire the services of a medium or who's not kind of into that world, would is it similar, the misunderstanding that people have with you? And am I like imagining that that misunderstanding is accurate? Like, because I kind of sort of see that world that you kind of, like work in as a little bit misunderstood kind of space from the general public. Have I
Sure.
caught something there that's accurate, or am I just imagining it?
I think so. I think if if that's not the circle that, or the thing people say that they're into, then I think people have this um, stereotypical view that mediums can be a bit wild and wacky, and a bit out there. Um, and for me, it's a way of life. I'm a spiritualist, is my religion. And for me, being a spiritualist is not so much about talking to the dead and communicating to those that have um, died. It is about living well and helping others to live well and appreciate that we are all worthy of a good life, and that we are all connected to one another, and that we should all treat each other and this beautiful earth that we live on well. That to me is spiritualism, and the religion of spiritualism, and the fact that, you know, I get a sense of people. I've always had that sensitivity about me, and when I started to develop that ability, it strengthened me. It enabled me to understand myself more, and yeah, it brought aspects of myself to the fore that, yeah, just settled me into myself, and I'm grateful for that. And that enabled me then to understand others and give me a greater empathy for them. And that I'm grateful for. The fact that I have an ability that means I can help others or connect to others that are deceased just means that. But I would never force that onto anybody unless they have given me permission to, unless I am working on a platform, or they have come to me in a professional manner. I do not advocate or agree with these programs that you see out there where people are accosting people in the supermarket.
No, that's not where I was going. What I was going, where I think you nailed it. You said that you're comfortable within yourself. You've been able to sort of fall into that space as you got to know yourself and understand yourself and your the way that you experience things and people around you, etc. And that seems to be also helping you dealing with this version of misunderstanding that's happening because you don't look like you've had a stroke, etc. Are those skills transferable in that you know yourself, you know who you are,
Yeah.
you're making assumptions, you're making judgments about me, and what does a stroke survivor look like to you? Like, what does that even mean? Um, and you have kind of like I suppose you have more of an insight as to how to handle people with kind of screwy faces.
Yeah. And I just think that says more about them than it does me.
Yeah.
And there's a book that I read many years ago, and it was a friend of mine that introduced it to me, or suggested it to me. And it's called The Four Agreements by Don McGrail-Riez. And I read it, I don't know how many years ago, about 15 years ago. And it was a life changer. And these four agreements were something that I adopted. I can't recall them now. But it was something that I adopted then. And one of them is do not assume. So, if you assume anything about anybody, then there comes a period at some point that you have to then do the work to unassume everything that you've assumed about them. And
Tell me
that
about
takes a
that.
lot of effort.
Tell me about that. Why does that point come? Why do you have to get to that point where you have to unassume everything?
Because it's easier, instead of assuming something, ask. So instead of like the other day, my husband said something like, "Oh yeah, well, I bet they did this." I said, "You don't know that. He went, well, I bet. I said, you don't know that. You don't know that that's what they're thinking. Well, I said, you don't though, do you? He went, no. I said, so when you go to work tomorrow and you ask them and you're wrong, how are you going to feel? Oh, a bit stupid. I said, so all of this assumption and getting fired up that they've done X, Y, Z, and all of this feeling, ill feeling potentially, you're going to have to unwind that. So instead of just leaving it right now and not feeling anything, you've got a whole load of more work to do tomorrow after you've asked them. So instead of just leaving it empty, that's what I mean by assumption.
Yeah.
So in this book where it says do not assume, ask questions, speak to people in the first place. So if you don't know, don't assume that you know. Don't jump to an assumption about anybody or a situation. Don't overthink stuff. Don't, because when you actually begin to know the truth, you have to then unpick everything that you felt or think that you know, or there's so much other work that you have to do because you have formulated your own thoughts or own conclusion, which could be actually wrong. And you could have saved yourself all of that work in the first place by asking a question.
Yeah. And the energy and the
All of it.
high blood pressure and the
Right?
elevated heart rate and all of that stuff and the anger and the concern
Yeah.
and whatever. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's a prof- it's a profound statement, that we don't realize we're doing it a lot of the time. People just go down that
Exactly.
path. And that's the thing about people who we come across who don't know what stroke looks like or are ignorant to stroke. They come across, they make an assumption, they get shocked, they don't know how to respond. And often
Just that.
it just happens where it's a little bit uncomfortable, etc. Especially if you're somebody like me who, when somebody makes an assumption about the way I look or am or whatever, they hear it in a nice way. They get told, and then when they get told, the backpedaling might begin and those types of stuff. I try not to bring them to that stage, but I don't shy away from saying to somebody, well, I don't know how might you have felt if you had three brain surgeries. You had one brain surgery, three strokes. You couldn't walk. You had to learn how to walk again. Every day your left side hurts. That's the real thing with me. It's like my pain is ongoing and it's every day, and my deficits on my left side, and that's the biggest challenge. Is like I go to work and I'm wiped out by sometimes 10 o'clock, and then I've got to still get through that day, and I've got to bring the guys along with me for the ride, and I don't need them to be seeing me and thinking this guy's not doing enough. So there's a lot of explanation to put people at ease that, you know, I am pulling my weight, I am doing my bit in my own way, the way that I can do it. And it's just it's me getting comfortable with just being able to uh if I have the opportunity to set the scene, so that once I've set the scene, the expectations of the other person are managed, and then once they're managed, then it's an easier conversation on a regular basis rather than assumptions being made by that other person just through ignorance. It's the situations where I don't have that opportunity to do the groundwork and set the expectations, where people often kind of get caught out by somebody that looks like me saying, hey, no, I'm not well today, and I can't do what you're asking, and then trying to get them over the line. Uh,
why do you, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that you are responsible for getting them over the line?
So it might not be right or wrong. I don't know why the answer is to whether it's right or wrong. However, I feel that way because it seems like it allows me to do less work later. And the way I feel later gets the the negative the negative side of how I feel later in that assumption, like game, is decreased. And I feel like I've made it easier for the person who's ignorant a little bit as well later so that they don't feel a little bit um like not attacked, but like they don't feel like I'm judging them or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So I just try and diffuse it, I suppose, that whole thing that might happen later.
You're not responsible for how other
I
people
know.
feel.
I know I'm not. It's just the process that I go through. It's just sort of, it's got a lot to do with my upbringing and it's got a lot to do with the way I go about my work and the expectation that when I go to work and I have to deliver an outcome that I need to get paid for it. Uh,
Mm.
Part of it is setting the expectation how I'm going to deliver that outcome because people's idea of how you deliver, especially in my field, like with property maintenance and repairs and painting and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of shows now on TV that show in half an hour and a half an hour episode, the guys paint their entire house and bang, and there you go, and anyone can do it. And somebody who's never picked up a brush before and they get, you know, the highest rank and they win a prize and all that kind of stuff. There's that has impacted our business because we have to re-educate people on how things are done. And I've got to do that with my deficits as well. Doing it before, I could push harder and I could go through barriers and we could do extra hours and we could work Saturdays and Sundays. They're all off limits now. So there's strict rules as to how I work. And if I don't lay those ground rules out, that also includes my stroke sometimes, then I annoy the client and then that impacts the way that we get paid, the smoothness of the job, etc. So part of that has kind of infiltrated my personal life because that's what I do most of the day and I've been doing for 20 years. So I come home, like the dumb things also that I do because of my work is I come home and I see imperfections in the wall or in the
Yeah, that's
door.
your trade, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, in the
You-
door and all these weird places. And I go to people's houses and I notice them as well. I don't say it, but that work has infiltrated my personal life. As much as I try to distance myself from it, I end up going back to that work every day. So, it's a bit of a task. Um, and I'm not perfect as well. Like I'm a podcast and I'm presenting the Recovery After Stroke podcast, but I'm a human and I struggle with the same things other people struggle with. I try and talk about it as much as relevant to each episode, but you know, I'm far from the the standard.
But we're all human,
Yeah.
so we're all in, imperfect. That's what we're here for. That's the experience, the human experience.
I kind of don't mind it. I want to make sure that I'm clear that I don't mind it, but I'm intrigued by it. And when it happens, I try to observe myself in certain situations that are weird, uncomfortable, difficult. And it's like that guy before. I like to observe that guy treating myself in that way and pretending that you've had setbacks and you haven't achieved your goals and forgetting that you didn't have that you've had a stroke or two. And I try and play that role as well. Like I don't just I do my best not to sit in the space where it's impacting me negatively. I'm a problem solver by nature. So I'd love to notice where things can be improved and always seek improvement um, for my own benefit so that life is easier and I'm more resilient. I'm going after resilience and adaptiveness, and I'm also trying to become more respondent and also sometimes unrespondent, when necessary,
Sure, that's really important.
you know. And as a hot-blooded Greek background, younger brother of an older brother, not responding is such a tool that I need to learn and master.
Just because you're invited to a fight doesn't mean that you have to go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've never shied away from any kind of confrontation. I've spoken about it with my wife recently, you know. I don't mind confrontation. She dislikes confrontation, so we kind of, that's where we get stuck or unstuck sometimes. And
I'm
that's where,
married to one of those, doesn't like confrontation,
yeah,
doesn't do well with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just don't take it personally. I don't take confrontation personally, whereas my wife and other people I come across might. And I'm sometimes not even being confrontational. I might just be like very
Playful.
passionate, talkative, loud, whatever. And I get the why are you yelling? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not yelling. I haven't even started yelling yet. I'm just talking,
This
and
is
my
a
hands,
warm up.
yeah, my hands are going everywhere and it's a sight.
It's that Greek blood in you.
Man, it is. And, in my home where I grew up, my dad and my brother, and on my dad's side of the family, they're all loud and big and tall and huge. And and that's just normal. You go into that house, and when everyone was around, it was loud. The decibels were through the roof. Now,
That would be no good for my glass head
yeah,
at all.
and it's not good for me now. Um,
No.
but I understand, the version of conversation that looks crazy to an outsider who is gentle, non-confrontational, listens more than talks. I get it. Uh, so yeah, I have my identity is full of my work guy, and my identity has expanded since the strokes and all that stuff and evolved. But there's definitely a lot of that guy that trying to please other people for money guy that infiltrates my daily interactions sometimes.
I think it's tricky when because stroke changes everything and you have to adapt and not, for me personally, allow for it to be everything, that it's part of of you but not everything.
Mm.
And for me, it's like when I had children and, oh, you're so and so's mum. No, I'm Helen. It's I love being a mum. I have 4 children. Well, two are adults now. And but it's not the be all and it and the end all. There's so many aspects to all of us as humans. And I think when we grab at one thing to shape our whole identity, we miss out on it, on everything else.
And it's so hard later when you're challenged by stroke and your identity gets knocked about, and then you're doing the whole I can't be a mum anymore, or I can't pick up the
Yeah.
kids from school and I can't do that. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's one of the things that didn't catch me off guard, which was great. My identity is kind of broad enough and flexible enough so that I was still able to be a dad without picking them up from school. I was
Yeah.
still able to be a dad without taking them fishing and all that kind of stuff. I missed out on fishing, and it would
Yeah.
have been lovely to go, but I didn't stop being a dad. I just changed the way I was being a dad.
Eking it out, finding, cultivating a new pathway for yourself
Mm.
within the challenges that you face. I think that's really important, Bill. You're absolutely right.
And then there's in my book, there's a chapter where I talked about the I compared it to the being an empty nester. You know, my boys have both moved out now, and
Right.
it happened probably 10 years after the first incident, and they were old enough to move out, so we were kind of getting in each other's space, where we were living. So it was good, but I missed them, and I had like separation anxiety and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
But yeah, but there's also that empty desker, which is the person
yeah.
who has a job, and all their friends, all their connections, all the people they associate with are all related to their work. And then they either have to retire or for health reasons have to stop working, or they lose their job,
Yeah.
and their identity cops uh, a real
Yeah.
knock.
Yeah.
And then it's like, who, if I'm not the guy that goes to work and doesn't deal in all that space, and I haven't had a hobby, and I haven't had a gym, or I haven't had this, or I haven't had like, it's like, then who am I? What do I do? How do
Yeah.
I interact with the world? And what am I going to talk to everyone else about that doesn't work in that space or live in that space?
Yeah. Yeah. I I talked about it last night. I was working on. I have a spiritual community, and we were online last night. I talked about that in our philosophy, about going little. Sometimes there's a need to go small, and in going small, sometimes you can find aspects of yourself that you didn't know there was there. And when you go small, because I think society nowadays is demanding us to be big all the time, go large or go home. And but I believe that sometimes when life, or you allow yourself, you have the courage to fall and go small, that there's such a beauty in that, because you allow yourself, like I said, to find aspects of yourself that you didn't know that was there. Um, because I've always been very fiercely independent, from a very young age, and obviously the stroke taught me other things about, um, allowing other people to do things for me, not only medical stuff, but my husband had to be my carer for a long time. Um, every aspect of my, well, not every, but helping me shower, helping me dress. I had to feed me because I couldn't even cut my food. I remember the first meal after the stroke. I could see that it was food. I knew it was food, but I couldn't feed myself. I didn't even know how to cut my food. I didn't know what a knife and fork was for. Yeah, the memory came back when I saw
Mm.
him do it, but I didn't have the dexterity or the physical strength to do it. Um, you know, I couldn't brush my teeth. I couldn't. So people had to do it for me. So in doing, having to have people do that for me, taught me at things about myself, you know, humbleness, humility,
Mm.
da 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 da. But then having my life so little and only being able to do a small amount of things because you just don't have that brain energy. You can't, you know, and if when people are talking around you, you can't you literally can't compute, and it hurts your brain.
Mm.
In the end, you know, people are like, okay, we need to go outside because you're like, you know, go away. Um, so you know, you learn stuff about yourself constantly. The other thing, even before that, you know, where you talking about in your own life, you know, being an expat, when I moved from England to the Netherlands, my life became small and little because my friend group, my work group, my all of that. So my life became small then, you know. So it in you learn things about adaptability, resilience, and but in doing things like that, when life becomes small and little, and allowing things like that for other people to show themselves, they grow and you see them in different ways. And I think there's beauty in that. You see yourself in a different way, but you see others in a different way. And you all grow in different ways in that moment. And I think there's beauty in that.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. Um, what's the hardest thing about stroke?
For me, the loss of the independence to drive, because that was the big thing. And it still is, because it's limited me, I believe, of being able to get up and do things. And I see how that's impacted on my husband, because we don't have a support of um, a a big friend network, or family. It is just us. So um, that is, I think, the hardest thing. Um, Not being that independent, being able to get in the car, go do my grocery shopping, because I loathe the online shopping, you know, where they substitute stuff. I don't want that. I want to be
Mm.
able to choose. Thank you. Um, and just to be able to take for granted, to be able to go into a noisy place and not be so um, and not be affected by the noise, the lights, and people, um, because everything has to be considered
Yeah, that is a
now.
that can be a hard one for sure. Uh, I went through that as well. The inability to attend sports events and concerts and all that kind of stuff, and being asked to, and not being able to say yes because I didn't want to be in those environments for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and then probably not going to be fun if I'm there for the other people. So it was better to stay home.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, not, you know, to go sort of to a marquee and if there's a disco and this, that,
Mm,
and the other, that each I can't contemplate to do that. And even to a restaurant or
mm.
whatever, that's a big consideration. What's that going to be like? What's the music level going to be like? How many people could be there? Likelihood is, you know, probably about an hour tops. That's with, my special ear loops, my special glasses.
One of the things I do when I go to a restaurant now is I look up to see if they've got acoustic tiles, if they have a good acoustic setup. That's another weird thing that I do is I go and check out restaurants and see. And if we go one time and they haven't got a good acoustic setup and the noise is bouncing everywhere and it drives me bonkers, then I never go back to that restaurant again. We won't go back. It happens so often. And it's strange how people don't take that into consideration just for a nicer atmosphere for their guests. That's all. Not even for people who might have noise sensitivity issues, just regular kind of nice environment for a restaurant. I feel like they need to take um, more consideration of the acoustics. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. I think, that is there's always I think in life now, there's always sort of a trade-off. Part of me feels a bit like an imposter in the stroke community, if you like, because I'm very aware that I'm walking, I'm moving, like I say, I'm very vain in the fact, my face is fine and da 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 da. But if you put me in a loud environment and whatever, I can't be, I won't last long. So I know that I've had a stroke and this, that life is very different. But I am, I can, like you've said, life is very different. You have to manage your day. You can do this. You have to be very considered. I'm aware that I can work a full day in my work. I can do a long shift. Like yesterday, I worked a long day. I worked a long day on Tuesday. I can do it in my line of work. And I love my work, and I'm very fortunate that I can do it. It's not been affected. So there are, six of one, half a dozen of the other. And there's hope with my neurologist that as I come the other side of the menopause, that maybe status migrainosis goes, that I will no longer have this horrible constant migraine every day. There's hope for that. We don't know.
mm,
So it might get better. But like I said to her, if it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't, whatever.
mm,
I'm here, I'm alive, I'm living, I'm doing stuff, I'm
mm.
whatever. And she's like, well, don't you want that? I'm like,
You'll
I'm
take the win.
here.
You'll take the win if you can
Yeah,
get
I'll
it. Yeah.
take the win.
Yeah. What has stroke taught you?
So much. I'm always, I'd like to think, a positive person. Yeah, I have my down days. I have, I'm, like we've said, human. But I don't unpack. I don't stay there. I've Stroke has taught me just how resilient I am. The fact Stroke has taught me just how common it is. how you shouldn't look at somebody and say, oh, they've not had a stroke because they don't present with the droopy face, with the limp, with the da, because that's not true. That we should all be good to one another, because life changes in an instant. In an instant. So with people that you love, just tell them exactly how you feel all of the time, and don't assume that you've got tomorrow, because that's not necessarily a given.
That is very true. What do you want to tell other people who are listening, who are on a similar journey?
Live well. Live life according to what feels good and authentic to you. Don't allow others to tell you what is right and proper for you. Live according to what feels authentic to you. Because people mean well, and they think that they are telling you all that is true for you. But ultimately, you are the one that is the barometer of what feels the best for you. And if you are unsure of what that is, then take a moment, because there's a Hellenism that I always have, that is, if you are unsure of what it is that you want to do, then do nothing. Just pause, breathe, sit with it, and then allow for that, just that silence within you to guide you, because that will eventually tell you where it is that you want to go. Because nobody should have autonomy over you. You are the one that knows best.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure. I'm so pleased to have finally met you, Bill. Keep up the good work and be kind to yourself.
Well, that is a wrap of this incredible episode with Helen van Hooft. Her journey through migrainous stroke and her insights as a spiritualist remind us of the power of resilience, adaptability, and the importance of living authentically, even in the face of profound challenges. Before we go, I want to thank you all for being a part of Recovery After Stroke community. Your comments, support, and feedback mean the world to me, and they help us connect with more stroke survivors and caregivers worldwide. If this episode resonated with you, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Spotify. We are at about 47 at the moment. I'd love to get it to above 50. Also, consider leaving a review on iTunes if that's where you listen to your podcasts, or hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Your support helps others find the podcast and join our growing community. For more resources, remember to visit recoveryafterstroke.com. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.